like how do I let on that he's kind of realizing that they are nice?
Yeah.
It's so throughout the entire diner scene is when he's thrown into this world that he has this huge anticipation going into, and that's really where his character is made dynamic, right? Before that, he's kind of this brute, sort of militarized, sort of very matter-of-fact person with dry humor. But then he gets into this diner and he's made a nerd. He's now a dork, basically, in this land where he thinks that he's going to be, you know. And so it was a matter of making sure to stay committed to this idea that these are aliens to him, and like, no matter, even if they're showing niceness, it's going to come off as something as sexual as, you know, some kind of devious manipulation or something like that. And so it's only those moments where he physically feels good, not necessarily emotionally or socially, drinking the coffee, the ear massage, different things like those moments are where he's kind of let loose and feels things that he's never felt before. And those are really the first instances where he's let into like kind of realize like they're kind of awesome, like, you know what I mean? And you know, yeah, so I guess it was mostly that, but yeah.
I know you said you got to work with him. Did you feel any pressure to sort of stick with the way Tim Mooney does these characters?
Right.
Or did you have a lot of chance to sort of make it your own?
I did. Thankfully, I was able to kind of rehearse. Specifically, how do you know how to word that? Working through the diner scene specifically was one thing. Interpreting those characters of the waitress and the driver, I had thankfully been able to work on that before I met with him, before I saw any of his performances of it. So that was really unique in the aspect that I was able to come up with those interpretations separately from when I saw him do them. Not that his are like drastically different, but there was definitely different motivations, different inflections that he does that I don't. Other specific things are that just unique, not necessarily to actual interpretation, but memorization, technicality. He has the script in his mind differently than is written on there. He was performing some pieces for me, and I was like, you said like 80% of the words that are in front of me. Like, he was like, yeah, well, that's because that's how they are in my brain. I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. Like, he actually doesn't even say the number right. He says 589768883 whatever. That's wrong. And I pointed it out to him, and he's like, "Yeah, that's because how I memorized it." So he doesn't care. But Janelle looked this up for me, and no one ever will have 00 in their social security number. So this isn't something you could steal after this. So don't try, even though I know you will. So it's like when you hear a phone number in TV shows and it's 555-55555. It's the same thing with 00s in the middle. Any more fun facts about social security numbers?
Oh yeah, I was talking earlier before all of the people were in here. So 00 is not allowed. Also 0000 is not allowed.
666.
666 is not allowed. But 69 is. Also everyone thinks that Social Security is the mark of the devil that's talked about in Revelation. So the end of the world's happening. Yay! I know. I marked my.
So those are some specific things that were different, sort of, that I noticed working with Tim and working on my own. Yeah.
Here's a question. How long have you had the mark on your hand now, or did you just put it on tonight?
I put it on right before the show. Or is this gone?
You actually got it tattooed.
I used powder.
Yeah.
I used powder on it. So.
Yeah.
Did it feel like it brought you into the story?
Oh,
Were you intrigued? Were you like, what is this? What's that? Who am I?
You want to show Social Security number?
Yeah. Because we're typing it in. Like, what?
How long did it take you to make that? Like, you make it out of a eraser, right?
I did it yesterday about an hour. Right? I did it wrong first. So
Yeah,
it's
you did it
I
back.
carved it backwards first and put it on my hand. I was like, ah! I had just spent so long working on it, and I was like, I just made that backwards. And so I had to do it again. But yeah, it's just out of a linoleum block, which is like essentially a sheet of eraser. And then I hot glued it to a pencil. So seems it's got the job done. Hannah's like, may I brush your teeth? Okay, great.
Tell us about the song at the beginning.
The song at the beginning is called "What Will the Martians Think?" Tim wrote that, collaborated with one of his friends. who then his friend recorded it. And so it's written in the world of this, or kind of like meant to set up kind of the idea of this. And so it also helps set the tone of comedy, right? Which is subtle at the beginning. There's only a few jokes at the beginning, and then once you hit the diner, I mean, hopefully you laugh like you thought it was funny. So what will the Martians think is, sort of a take on the idea of like, let's really look at where we are right now as a society, all the choices we're making. If everyone was extinct right now, what would a civilization that came here knowing nothing about us learn? What would they explore? What would they kind of do? Things like that. And so
what was the first part where you just came out and huffed and then went back in?
It's written in to be like that. So the premise is sort of, and you may have caught this, but at the end, he sort of decides to, once he becomes a 5, obviously the beginning, and so war had come to this, a man on the bridge with power, blah, blah, blah. That's actually after all of the events of the through line, the train, that's way after that. But you might notice he still had his hand. Well, why is that? Wouldn't he have been found out? Tim explained this to me, and I worked through it with him and had some ideas of my own, but he becomes sort of an agent for the 5s after that experience. He has all of this intel on the 4s now, which is very vital to the 5s, all of this information about how they operate, and so he's very useful to them. And so what that is the premise of when I come out here and I'm looking at you all and I have my binder that says,
Secret.
you're my recruits. You're my 5 recruits. And so I'm kind of updating you on like kind of the history of our, you're basically in a history class, so. Yes?
Do you think personally that like when they did the historic timeline and stuff, do you think that any of that could maybe happen? Conspiracy-wise, do you think anything like
terror?
We're in
yeah,
the
you
terror,
think
guys.
yeah, we're in the terror,
think
which
it's
that's kind of
Yeah,
happening.
do I think this could happen? Maybe. Hopefully this kind of helps people realize what could happen if that happens. You know what I'm saying?
There is
I mean-
nuclear waste buried in the Yucca Mountains, by
Yeah,
the
that's
way.
this is
Is that-
fact.
yeah,
That's
that's
fact.
real.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
it's
it says it's where it happens in the and then
No.
Yeah.
oh no.
Well, yeah, and so yeah, I mean, it's kind of playing. He has that quote in there. As long as there are distinctions between groups will naturally gravitate to their own, and I think that's really sort of the drive. It deserves repeating. As long as fuck it, whatever. You remember the anyway, but so that's kind of a theme of this is that to realize that we're comfortable with what's familiar, and when we get uncomfortable with what is unfamiliar, it can lead to sort of disastrous things, right? No matter what it is. Today, it could be race, sexual orientation, religious preferences, what have you. In their time, it's literally a number on your hand. So even after, like he says, back in the day, you could tell the difference between a black man, a white man, Asian, Hispanic, but in this future, there is no race. Everyone looks enough alike that you would never be able to tell the difference between each other. The only thing is that number. And so I think, while maybe this would not specifically happen, so, I mean, just hopefully you leave tonight thinking about some of these things. Ross.
What was your favorite section of the script to perform, to rehearse, to whatever?
I really liked the, the diner scene is super fun. The most fun definitely the most fun when he's being just stripped, literally. But I meant like of his sort of barriers, his like fake persona when that's being taken away from him. That's really fun to explore that he's faced with something that's so unfamiliar. And then playing the sleazy hostess and the broad-shouldered trucker. But the most fun to rehearse is definitely the end sequence. It's stressful to perform, but that was the most fun to rehearse because it's just like you're flying, you're racing. He writes in the stage directions. He's racing now, and so and discovering the pantomimes within the assembling the device and the modeling the orb or things like that, those were definitely fun to rehearse. Yes.
So you told me during Footloose that you had a favorite line there. Do you have a favorite line in this show?
Yeah, probably when he says, 3 beautiful days walking the highway, cutting across corners, down steep hillsides, along narrow ravines, stumbling across rivers and even waterfalls, staying away from diners. That's my favorite. I think that was my favorite line. Yes.
I imagine you probably had some time where you like specifically looked at blocking, but percentage-wise, how much of your rehearsal was actually like standing and doing the thing, and how much of it was like working on lines and stuff that's
Right.
less of a formal rehearsal setting?
There were a lot of times where I went in that dressing room right there, put the mirrors up in such a way that I could look into all 3 of them. So when I was the waitress, I was looking into that mirror. When I was the trucker, I was looking into that mirror, or whatever, something like that. And I'm an actor who thrives on physicalization when it comes to memorization, and so doing specific gestures, being in specific locations, poses, positions, whatever, helps me put the words in my brain. And so there were a lot of times when I was actually physically rehearsing. I found that sitting down or laying in bed trying to read my script almost did nothing for me in terms of memorization. Obviously, analysis and learning intense was okay in that sense, but getting up and walking through it, doing the running, doing the different things like that was crucial to it as
Did you have times? Like, did you do it at 6 every night, or
well.
just whenever you had time?
I probably did it at least 5 times a week. Yeah, I found times almost every day to run through it, work on a section.
At what stage did you determine or decide on your costume?
This
It's
is-
like, right. It felt like a costume to me.
Yeah,
It
this
felt
is
very-
exactly 100% what Tim wears.
Oh, okay.
Like not his clothes. Down to the brand of shirt. When he came here and visited Northwest, he says, actually, in honor of our meeting, I wore my costume for Criteria. And I was like, really? And so he's like, yeah. So you may remember him as wearing, he had like a green button-up shirt that day, but underneath he was wearing exactly this. Down to the shoe and everything, like same thing. So I went to Walmart like a couple days later and got the black jeans and the shoes and the underwear. I was gonna wear heart boxers, but I thought that would be too distracting, and I asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh no, it's funny enough as it is, and it doesn't need to be anything more." And I was like,
It's
"That's
too much
me."
soul.
So yeah, that's how the costume.
Where did you get the shirt?
I've had the shirt for a while. At middle school, I think. So I have a lot of clothes that are really old.
You'd be as a 3rd grader, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of where that came from. Thank you.
Did you think about cutting your hair short for it?
I did.
You said.
He has the line, thankfully well-trimmed beards and closely cropped hair were in fashion, and I didn't have to pack extra toiletries for their upkeep. Well, he said, I said, should I go get a haircut? And he was like, no, because the audience is already suspending their disbelief. I mean, he says you could, in the past, tell the difference between a black, white, Hispanic, Asian, and now you can't. I'm white. So I think people are already, in that sense, suspending their disbelief. Also, by the end of it, he says my beard has grown out to 7 days length. So by that logic, should I grow a beard halfway through the show? You know what I mean? So he made me start thinking about that, and I was like, oh yeah, and you know what? I mean,
We just believe you.
yeah, right. And so perhaps I even asked him, should I change the lines? Should I say thankfully, curly hair? And he was like, no, just let it fly. I was like, okay. And so, yeah, but I definitely asked him because I thought that same thing. Yeah.
Just a point of
Yeah.
benefit to you, kept me engaged the whole time.
Great.
It was- it just-
Good.
It was just engaging.
Yeah, and so the challenge of that is, I can comment on that a little bit, especially during memorization. And Callie can attest to this too. When I was really early on in memorization, I was listening to my now screaming recordings and regurgitating those, or listening and saying it along with it, which was very robotic. But in any case, then when I was like, all right, hey Callie, I want to show you what I have. We went on the Mary Lynn and I did like a third of it, and like, it came out like this. Man, which was like super boring and like it wasn't interesting. It was just like information, nothing is like, you don't care.
Like I couldn't remember it
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah, and so that was a big challenge, was early on in the memorization process, yes, the words need to get into my brain, and there's a lot of them, but they also need to get into your brain and make sense. And so it was definitely after memorization was becoming more solid, working through how he feels, how he wants people to feel, how he's been taught to feel, different things like that. So that's kind of what plays into that engagement. Yeah.
I had a question about the lighting design.
Yeah.
At what point did the idea of using this space as unique, like 2 separate kinds of room lights, come into play? Because I found that very interesting.
Yeah. 4 days ago.
Oh.
Where's Bree? She here?
No.
Yeah. So so originally, and I don't know if Lawrence. Okay. Well, I was originally going to do this on Mary Lynn. We were going to bring in the main curtain and set up seating in front of the curtain, so you all would be on the stage, and like the main curtain of Mary Lynn would be behind you, and the cyclorama would be flown in, and I would be talking in front of that. We were going to have lighting on that and all this stuff, and I was like, well, let's keep it simple. That was my design choice for everyone. I was like, keep it simple. And then we realized like there was a concert in there, and they were going to have to move all the sound shells out. We were going to have to set up seating, and so I was like, this already has a projector. It's got a friggin' sound thing right over there. It's got everything I need. And I was like, Bree, literally, I just saw a video of Tim perform this, and he had a guy switch the light off in between everything. He had no special lighting. He was in a classroom. And I was like, that was fine. Like, that was fine. And then I was like, well, let's do it down here. And then she's like, actually, we can control the fluorescence and the warm lights individually. I was like, oh, that's cool. Let's play with that. And then I was like, and then she said, it's actually probably not hard to set up some of the pars down here. And I was like, really? She was like, yeah, I can do it. So, okay, let's try it. And so yesterday, we set these all up, focused these, and set it up then, basically. I mean, we talked about it a couple days ago, but we set it all up yesterday, really. And I just went up and picked gels that I thought would look cool. I hope you kind of got the idea that this was in the past, right? The blue lighting outside, nighttime. He only travels at night until the sun comes up, kind of thing. And the lighting design here with the warm lighting from this part and the white lighting from that, focusing that more on the conference room sort of feel, white, sterile, antiseptic walls. And then the warm lighting over here to when I move closer, I'm outside, I'm in a more welcoming environment, the diner, all lights come up, makes you guys feel like you're in a diner, hopefully. Little Den Brown land. Cool. So that was how the lighting was.
Which one of your past theater experiences or classes, I guess, prepared you for something different like this?
Definitely one of them was voice and movement. Voice and movement class was really useful in this because I can't rely on anyone else when I'm up here. I'm alone, and nobody else is going to come through that door. You know, it's just me the whole time, and so it was. I might have just blinded 50 people. It was a matter of trying to physicalize his feelings and make the lecture interesting. He's literally like giving a history lecture. Like, how the hell do you make that interesting? None of these. Anyway, so, not you, I meant like the history. Not you, not you. Just dig that hole. So, but while I'm praising you, right? Anyway, so voice movement was really useful for that. We learned a lot of techniques with physicalization and finding within both ways to create gestures from within, from feelings, and creating feelings from gestures, right? So starting in such a way that you're doing something physical that gives into a feeling, which can then motivate some specific lines and things like that. So that, of course, the acting, advanced acting classes, which just sort of made me think specific questions about him and what he's going through. Oral interp. Oh, oral interp, because of focus, the focus and locus. Yeah, because I was the diner scene specifically is a great thank you. Yes, a great example of focus and locus. Differentiating those characters, I mean, of course, with voice and the positions and whatever, but also it placed the people in the diner, right? So the trucker was obviously to my left because I was looking right as the trucker. And the waitress was above me to the right because I was looking down, and when she talked to the trucker, I looked up a little bit, gestured over myself. Oral interp as well, for sure, and probably a million other classes, but yeah. I mean, tech skills electrics, how else would I have been able to do all these?
Who do that jogging?
Yeah. And jogging, yeah. Any other questions? Glad you guys are interested. Cool. Well, if you do come up with any more questions, you can totally email me, find me on the street, or sleeping next year. But yes, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for the great talk back. Have a good night.